Story 1. The diner and the highway. I used to work at a late-night diner in the Pacific Northwest, right off the highway. The place closed at 2:00 a.m., which was ridiculously late for such a remote area. Still, the proximity to the highway meant we'd usually have a few stragglers until closing time. That night, it was just me and the chef in the building. It was around 1:50 a.m. when he walked in, a heavyset man with awkwardly high jeans, a tucked-in gray shirt, and a brown jacket. His mustache and glasses gave him a nerdy, almost harmless appearance. He smiled at me, so I smiled back. I handed him a menu and told him the kitchen was closing in 10 minutes. He glanced at the menu briefly and ordered black coffee and French toast. He introduced himself as Nolan. As I relayed the order to the chef, who rolled his eyes at the late request, I couldn't shake the feeling that Nolan was a little too friendly for this area. People around here aren't big on small talk, but Nolan was full of questions. He asked where I was from, complained about the potholes, and even pressed me for specifics about my neighborhood. I gave vague answers, of course. I'm not stupid. When his food was ready, the chef brought it out himself, and I delivered it to Nolan. By then, I was exhausted and ready to go home. I stayed behind the counter, cleaning up and avoiding further conversation. When Nolan finally finished, I dropped off his check without him asking, hoping he'd take the hint. He paid with a card, smiled, and left. I grabbed my things, said goodbye to the chef, and walked out to the parking lot. There were 3 cars, mine, the chef's, and a silver, older model car I didn't recognize. It was parked near the highway, and I couldn't tell if anyone was inside. I wondered if it was Nolan's car, but didn't stick around to find out. I got in my car and started driving home. About 10 minutes into the 20-minute drive, my tire pressure light came on. I panicked. I didn't know how to change a tire, and I was still a good distance from home. The pressure dropped rapidly, and soon the entire car was shaking. I had to pull over. As I stepped out to inspect the flat tire, headlights appeared behind me. A car slowed to a stop, and I hurried back into my vehicle, locking the doors. My heart raced as I saw Nolan approach my window. He tapped lightly, smiling like this was some kind of coincidence. "Kathy, is that you? Are you okay?" he asked, laughing. I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew he had done this. I lowered the window just enough to speak. "I've got a flat tire," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He played dumb, asking which tire it was. I told him, and he walked around to inspect it. As he did, I dialed 911 and left the phone on my lap. When he came back, he offered to help me change the tire. "I'm waiting for my boyfriend," I lied. "He's on his way." Nolan's smile faded. He stood there for a moment, then walked away. I whispered into the phone, explaining the situation to the operator. But before I could finish, the sound of shattering glass made me scream. Nolan had smashed my window. He reached in, grabbed my phone, and hurled it toward the highway. Then he ran back to his car and sped off into the night. I sat there, trembling, until the police arrived. They changed my tire and escorted me home. A week later, they called to say the investigation was ongoing. They never caught him. I quit the diner that night. I wasn't going to risk Nolan finding me again. Horror story 2. The amusement park stalker. I was 15, working at an amusement park in upstate New York. It was October, one of the last days the park was open before winter. My shift ended at 5:00 p.m., and I was exhausted. As I packed up my things, a man approached me. He had a scraggly beard, messy hair, and clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound polite. He stared at me for a few seconds, then glanced around like he was being followed. "Where are your bathrooms?" he whispered. I pointed him in the right direction, but as he walked away, he kept looking back at me. It creeped me out. I finished my shift, changed out of my uniform, and waited in the employee parking lot for my coworker Jordan to pick me up. We went to a diner for dinner, and that's when I saw him again. The same man was sitting a few tables away, staring right at me. I told Jordan, but he brushed it off as a coincidence. After dinner, we started the 35-minute drive home. At the first red light, I saw the man again, this time in a white Honda parked next to us. He was staring at me through the window. Jordan started to worry, and we took a few laps around the block before he dropped me off at home. My family was out, so I was alone. I jumped into bed, but soon I heard a noise at my window. I looked outside and saw the man standing on my front lawn, smiling up at me. I called 911, but by the time the police arrived, he was gone. I quit my job at the amusement park that week. I haven't seen the man since, but I'll never forget that night.